Well, less than 2 weeks into President Biden's term, the president signed an executive order to create a regional framework to address the root causes of migration. In March of 2021, he handpicked his vice president, Kamala Harris, to take lead on the, quote, diplomatic efforts to address those root causes. Well, fast forward to June 2022. During the 9th Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, the U.S. took the lead and with 20 other governments signed the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection. Those governments, 21 governments, agreed that migration must be addressed on a regional level rather than patchwork attempts by individual nations. The declaration outlined 4 pillars. 1, stability and assistance for communities. 2, expansion of legal pathways. 3, humane migration management. And 4, coordinated emergency response. Now, I admit it, I don't know what any of that means. Maybe you do. It just sounds like diplomatic gobbledygook to me. In any event, whatever those 4 pillars are, it sure hasn't worked, and the camera lens just doesn't lie. But let me go on. Those 21 countries made specific commitments. For example, Belize implemented an amnesty program for certain migrants. Colombia agreed to give temporary protected status for Venezuelan migrants and refugees. Mexico launched a temporary labor program providing work opportunities for 15,000 to 20,000 Guatemalan workers per year. And Canada increased refugee resettlements. Note the frequent use of the word temporary in these commitments. And to the extent even temporary commitments were met, it has certainly not solved the problem. The problem has gotten worse. So, how do we get to where we are today? Why did this declaration not work? And what are the national security threats now facing our nation as a result? House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has just tapped our next guest to lead a task force on neutralizing the Mexican drug cartels. Texas Congressman and retired U.S. Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander Dan Crenshaw joins me. You know, sir, it just makes me almost nuts when I see that we spent all these money for these big meetings, these big declarations, get all these countries together, you know, to reiterate our will to strengthen all these things. And it just, it just doesn't happen. I mean, it's just silly stuff. And I mean, does anybody believe this?
I don't think so. Look, I mean, I'd look into that particular declaration. Look, what does work is disincentivizing the illegal behavior, right? It works no matter what kind of illegal activity you're talking about. You can really simplify this entire conversation. People have to have a reasonable belief that if they cross the border, they'll be sent back, whether that's sent back to wait for their hearing in Mexico City, which is the Remain in Mexico program or the migrant protection protocols, or back to their home country. Right. If they don't have that belief, well, then they think there's a decent, or at least a more than 50% chance they'll just be allowed to wait out their time in the United States, whether they have a hearing scheduled or not, then they're going to cross. The entire situation is really that simple. Look, I'm all for these big regional meetings and getting other countries to do their part. I'm not against that. I don't think we should be criticizing that. But of course, it's not enough. And you mentioned the cartels and the task force that we're going to be looking at. But
Congressman,
go ahead.
I wouldn't criticize it. I wouldn't criticize it either if I saw a product. I wouldn't at all, and I would be, praising it from one end of the room to the other. But the fact is that, it hasn't done anything. I mean, that is a fact. So yes, that's why I'm criticizing it.
Sure. Like I said, it's not enough. But again, it's a distraction. When you talk to Democrats a lot of times they'll say, well, look, they want to bypass the conversation. They want to say, look, we got to address root causes. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? You want to make Guatemala a place where people want to stay versus the United States? It'll never happen, not for 100 years. The United States is always going to be the best place to be. And so you're always going to have that incentive structure in place. And so you have to disincentivize at least the illegal crossings. Again, the conversation is really simple. HR 2, what we passed this week, it fixes a lot of those loopholes. I would also say the administration has the tools it needs. They always make these excuses like, well, look, if we didn't have a broken immigration system, we wouldn't have this problem. That's not true. They could enforce the letter of the law to the T and actually deport people when they want to. They could do these things. They don't because they have very well-funded pro-illegal immigration groups that are very radical and will get very, very involved in Democrat primaries at times that they don't want. That's the truth of the matter. There's a lot of money behind these groups that don't want to solve this problem.
All right, what about cartels? Because, I mean, look, the cartels, they make a lot of money on this, too. I mean, which is complicated. And a lot of people, at least I read that the cartels have just taken control of this.
Sure. No, it's not that complicated. So they have operational control of the border. and charge, let's say a Guatemalan migrant might charge $300. They might be charged $300 to cross at a certain point. The cartels simply take that money and point them in the direction of Border Patrol, knowing full well that those people will be released into our cities. For other foreigners, maybe from China, say, they charge a lot more money. So cartels make billions and billions of dollars from this, and it's a zero risk proposition for them. And what do they do with that money? Well, they use that to fund their other enterprises, like poisoning our street drugs with fentanyl and killing 80,000 Americans a year. So the cartels are a key component of this. It's why we set up this task force, because HR 2 was designed to just deal with the incentive structures on the border and that border policy. And we said, look, we also have to deal with cartels that have operational control of the border and are killing tens of thousands of Americans a year. It's a separate line of effort, and we're in the task force will be designed to collect that legislation.
Okay.
Well, there's a number of things.
So what would you do about the cartels?
Yeah, there's a number of things. Like there's a law enforcement side to this, and I think there's a military side to this as well. I proposed to authorize use of military force against the cartels. That would be working in concert with Mexican authorities, the way we do in a variety of countries around the world. Target the cartels. You would target a typical terrorist network from the especially at the mid-level operations. That'll seek to destruct and dismantle their operations pretty quickly. It'll also send a message that we've had a red line when it comes to the fentanyl production. I think that's an extremely important part of that. On the law enforcement side, you want to do simple things like increase sentencing for cartel members, authorize going after their finances, authorize sanctioning, say, officials from other countries, like government officials that aid and abet these cartels. These are some authorities that are needed and very easy to pass in legislation, but we need to come together and actually get it done.
Texas Congressman, retired U.S. Navy SEAL Lieutenant Commander Dan Crenshaw. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.